Welcome to The Business Behind Your Business, the podcast where we delve into the financial strategies and insights that drive success for small and medium-sized business owners. I'm your host, Paul Sweeney, and in each episode we bring you expert guests who share practical advice, real-world experiences, and actionable tips to empower you on your business journey. Whether you're a seasoned entrepreneur or just starting out, get ready to uncover the secrets to success and gain valuable insights into the business behind your business. So welcome back to the Business Behind Your Business podcast. And today we're going to dive into a crucial topic, a very topical, conversation around, for all business owners, around handling those red flags that happen in your business. And most of those red flags we've seen have come around employees, the employment issue, or just navigating all the things that as a business owner you need to be aware of when dealing with employees. Now, this could be quite an expansive topic, but to help us stay on focus, I've enlisted the help of our two experts here. So we've got James Frank from Frank Law, who's a corporate lawyer and corporate business advisor, and Raj Nathoo, who's a learning and development specialist who's spent a lot of time in this employee area. So guys, welcome back to the podcast.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, it's good to hear. Good to see you guys again. And particularly interested in your insights because both of you are, I guess, brought in to fix problems that have occurred due to employee issues in business. But I'm also interested to hear the other end of the spectrum where we're actually looking at how we can prevent these problems from occurring in our businesses.
Yeah, there's certainly big problems. I think the reality is that employees are sort of your biggest strength, but also your biggest weakness in the majority of kind of businesses, and it's particularly SME businesses as well. So I think there's the double-edged sword of if you get it wrong, it can be really wrong, but if you get it right, it can be really, really impactful and helpful to the organisation and its clients. So yeah, it's kind of this spectrum of results, I guess, that can happen.
Yeah, that's very true. And especially in a country like Australia at the moment, where there's so much of change happening at the employment level with people from different backgrounds, different demographics coming together. So problems can arise from any kind of situation and in different kind of environments.
Yeah, the whole employment issue is one of the things that we get asked the most questions about here. Most of the questions from our listeners have been around how do we deal with these issues that come up in our business with employees, or what should I be aware of? So very topical, a lot of change going on in the environment. But I'm curious, what are the I guess some of the more common red flags that we see in business?
I guess. Well, there's a pretty big spectrum in terms of employment red flags, but like the I guess the high issue ones that we see are kind of non-conformity to their role and obligation, and sort of going outside or just not doing it, which is those kind of big things. There's the whole cultural piece of kind of like, yeah, good employee, but within the rotten apple that rots the barrel sort of thing. And then there's the more nefarious end of the spectrum, which is, using a position to gain some advantage to then, maybe spin off and do something else, by yourself, or, worse, go down the fraud path, using their position within the company to fraud. So that whole spectrum we've had in the last month. So it's kind of, it's people think to fraud, but it happens, and I guess there's an interesting. As SMEs have adopted technology and digital cards and sort of allowances, also the ability for the kind of control of funds, I think, has been pushed out a little bit. So it used to be quite concentric in that you had one person who would get all the receipts in, and be really clear about it. But now, if the bookkeeper's just clicking, reconcile, that's fine, and actually not checking the pattern, etc. I think there's an interesting challenge there that that's arisen as we've adopted technology. So from our point of view and a legal point of view, what we see is everything from just, laziness and why doesn't someone, why don't they turn up to work, right the way through to kind of, the I've committed a criminal offence. What do we now? What do we do?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow, that's quite interesting. I'm probably going to come from a totally different angle, and that's purely more based on employee relationships, I guess, and engagement perspective more than a legal angle. I think from all my time in training over the past 15 years, one of the issues I've always found a common denominator is communication and not clear communication in an organization. That seems to be like a theme that plays through in so many organizations and at so many management levels. It's just amazing. What management expects from employees is not what employees expected to do, and it wasn't clearly spelled out to them, or expecting them to go outside of what their actual employment arrangement is. That's another common one that I found. Then things like lack of training, which is a big thing in SMEs, because a lot of small medium enterprises, they look at training as a dead cost to the business rather than something that's going to have downstream benefits to them. So that's another one that I find to be very common. And then lack of accountability. And most recently, the one that I've found to be disturbingly and sadly disturbing is that there's this whole culture of not wanting to share what I know with someone else in the organization because that person might take my job away. And I think it's purely because of the way things are in the employment market at the moment, job security. Everybody wants to secure their own job. And so as a result, there's a lack of willingness to share knowledge and skills or whatever with other people that they're working with. So those are a couple of things that I've picked up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so we've got some different angles. And one of the things I always say is it's great to see all sides of the elephant. Which is why we've got Raj's perspective from the learning and development, James from the corporate side, and we've also heard from Paul Cripps, who's the human resources, I guess, advisor, and myself as the accountant, hearing my stories from clients. But there's a bit of overlap there, and I think communication seems to be a key thing here. And James, you're sort of the first two mentioned issues were non-conformity to the roles and obligations, and then that cultural difference. What sort of examples of issues are we facing there, and has that lack of communication sort of contributed to those issues?
Yeah, so I think every client that we engage with, and we're a little different in terms of the type of firm. So typically when a client comes to us, we're looking at a growth trajectory, or we're looking at a sort of a capital event where you've got institutional or investment money, right? So we put a ruler over all our clients and very early on say, well, one of the biggest areas of non-compliance from a company's point of view is around employment, right? So if we look at it from that point of view, and I think actually that's the first issue, right? Because fundamentally, if your workforce is not getting paid what you're meant to be paying them, and actually is not in line with the awards or the bargaining agreements that your industry has set, then that's going to have a significant impact on culture, especially if you miss the mark. That is, if someone finds out that it's not there, and we've had examples of this, they go to a union, they raise a red flag, then you've kind of the cultural horse has bolted, so to speak, because the trust in the employee-employer relationship diminishes significantly. So the first thing I'd say is, actually, as business owners, we need to be really clear about setting up an employment relations system that incorporates the legal compliance, and then kind of flows into that kind of internal, I guess, what governance regime that we would call it, where you're talking about culture and you're talking about people and talking about learning, development, etc. But number one is to say, well, are we compliant? And simple questions like, what award is applicable to all our staff, if any, right? Lots of our clients never ask that question, or they apply the same award to everyone. And that is equally problematic because, there's different people and classifications. The second is then, are we paying them properly in accordance with the classifications within the awards? Are we paying them, in accordance with review processes? And have we actually built in a system of ensuring our compliance is up to date? That's step one. Step two is, do our documents reflect that? Do we have employment agreements that actually share or communicate with the employee the expectations that we as an organisation have on them, and they're agreeing to in terms of, in that bargaining instrument? And again, I think we forget fundamentally that the employment relationship is a contracted relationship. That is, irrespective of whether you have a physical piece of paper, you are in a bound contract. So therefore, I, as the employee, am giving service to the employer. The employer for that service is giving me, a remuneration. There's a relationship there that needs to be respected on both sides. How do you do that? Well, if it was a BHP negotiating with Qantas, you put in place a very substantial contract. Same sort of thing. Put in place a contract that suits the SME and the type of employee, etc. And then off the back of that, then the policies, right? And lots of clients we have policies that are terribly outdated, that just actually don't reflect what the culture of the organisation is. And probably Raj can talk more about this, but kind of the policies are where the internal culture of the organisation and the learning, the development, the fulfilment of the individuals meet the compliance reality. All right. Mm-hmm. And so we'll get them up to that point and say, hey, you need to get this documented properly and we need to put this in place. But putting in place just a piece of paper for a piece of paper's sake is horrible. So how does the company culture and learning and development and the process and the desire for our employees to be fulfilled impact that? And then we kind of hopefully have this equilibrium where we've got employees that know what they're employed to do and they're paid accordingly to that. Mm-hmm. They've got a buy-in as to how they do it, and so they're in that process. If you don't have that, to be honest, you have instances where you have employees that either don't do the job they've been asked to do or that the employer thought they were going to do. And so you kind of have people not turning up or doing the wrong job or just not doing the job to the standard that they kind of require. And that's just miscommunication. And I guess I'm leaving out the outlier of just a delinquent employee, right? So like if you are an employee that's just like delinquent and doesn't want to do it, well, then you can have everything in place. They just don't care. So you kind of leave them. I'm talking about those that are seen as delinquent, but not really because they're just doing the job they thought they were meant to be doing, but it hasn't been adequately communicated. So from our point of view, it starts with communication has a document form. Fundamentally, though, that's got to be informed by this cultural learning development process. And it's a little bit of work backwards, work forwards, and you kind of settle into a system, and we call it an employment relations system, which has the compliance, has like the typical HR, people, culture, has the learning and development all together, and that's able to provide, clarity for employees so that ideally they can't say, I didn't know, but equally the employer can say, here's what we expect from you, and if that's not delivered consistently, well, then we've got some, I guess, room to move into the sort of next level of how do we manage those employees.
I think if I look at that question, I'd like to maybe take a step back and ask, I would say if I'm an employer, the first thing I would want to do is look at my business and say, what am I doing wrong or what are we doing wrong and what do we need to fix first? And one of the things I found very common with a lot of businesses that I went and did training with was lack of a proper induction and orientation program for anyone that's joined in a company. It's amazing that so many businesses, especially in the SME sector, the induction program is literally 1 hour, half an hour, or half a day, hardly more than that. And there's so much of research out there showing that companies that actually have a very good induction program actually hold on to good employees beyond the 6-month probation period. You'll find that companies that don't have a good induction program, employees find it difficult to assimilate and relate to that business. They don't understand the vision of this business and the vision of the founders of the business and what are they trying to accomplish and how Can I align my personal motivations and vision to what this business wants? Am I in the right place? Am I going to achieve my personal goals? And with younger generation employees, that seems to be more of an important factor today than what it was with older generation employees. Uh, it's all about what's in it for me today. That kind of attitude or approach, rather, more than attitude, the younger employees are having. So there's high incidence of staff turnover within a 6-month period simply because they could not relate to that business. Now, your induction program communicates this vision amazingly well if you have a good one. And within a quick period, that employee will know, okay, I think I want to be here because I can grow with this business and I can make a difference and I can advance my personal career in the process as well. Right. So that's what they want to know. What are the clear expectations from the business owners and how do they relate to what I'm expecting from myself? So that I think is an important aspect as far as communication goes. But just before we even get to induction, uh, the actual recruitment process again is another important thing. If you're looking just for uh, paying the baseline or lowest pay that possible, and you can just recruit anybody out of the street, then you're going to be making a big mistake because those are the kind of employees that will not last long and they tend to leave very quickly. And if you guys are familiar with Maslow's hierarchy of needs pyramid, you'll find that employees that are still trying to fulfill their physiological and security needs, which is literally at the bottom of the pyramid, they tend to change jobs very, very quickly and more often than those that are more self-fulfilled and looking for fulfilling their self-esteem needs or other higher order needs. So if you want to be employing people that are looking for towards fulfilling those higher order needs, because they are the ones that are looking to grow as an individual in terms of their personal growth and in terms of their knowledge, and because they're going to help you grow in your business as well. So those are some of the things I would firstly look at. If that sort of gels with or answers some of your questions there, Paul.
Yeah, I think just bringing those two angles together, we've got I guess the compliance side. James is talking about with your contracts and your awards and your policies. But what I've seen in a lot of small businesses, just that complying with the letter of the law, is that we've got the policy, we've got the employee to sign off on it, then get to work, rather than the process that Raj is talking about, the induction process, and making sure the employee is on board and I guess connected to the vision. They understand the process, they understand the culture, because the induction is another way of sort of establishing the culture and helping the new employee fit into the culture, because you can show a lot more. More than just saying, well, here's the kitchen, here's the toilet, don't spend too much time there, those sorts of things. But there's an opportunity there. And I think going back to the Elmo report, which came out, I can't remember, a couple of months ago, it was saying that 23% of employees are resigning before the end of their probation period. So if we don't get that communication up front, if they don't have a good induction period, we're going to lose them very quickly. But on the other aspect of that is we're going to have, if we don't do that well, we're going to have employees who stay who are either not engaged or not aligned with the overall vision of the business.
Yeah,
I think that having the employee stay that's not aligned is where we start getting into some of these other red flag areas.
Yeah. And it's probably more dangerous too, because they're harming your business because they're sticking around just for the paycheck and not really contributing to the business. And I think that comes from the Gallup poll as well, done a few times over the last few years, on the level of disengagement within the workforce.
And so I think that disengagement comes in as well, is that's got potential to harm your business, or because if they're not engaged and they're not looking after your business, they're not connected, then they're less likely to, I guess, stand up for a behaviour that's not compliant. That's not correct. And we talked about, the overrunning on the expense accounts, and just that chipping away at the boundaries of what's ethical behaviour and what's allowed.
Yeah.
When nobody's watching, it's a lot easier to go ahead. But also, if you're not invested in the overall business, and looking at family businesses, small, medium businesses, a lot of them are family owned, so there's a very personal connection there. There's a lot of danger that can be done by having an employee who's not engaged.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
So we've got our employees on board, and having a good induction process, making sure that we've got the right awards. I think if we went back 20 years ago, most employers, my age or older, would have just said, all right, I don't need to worry about that. We'll just do things the way I've been doing it. And I think that attitude is slowly disappearing because under the weight of new legislation and actions.
Well, just on that point, if I may pick up, Paul, there's research that shows that adults today in the workforce will change jobs and change careers at least every 3 to 4 years. So holding on to good employees, is a real challenge today for any business, whether you're big or small, immaterial today. And you often hear this phrase that I just can't find good workers anyway. But the thing is, what kind of environment have I created to hold on to good workers? That's the question I would first want to address.
So if you created a bad environment, then you're going to get these negative behaviours, this toxic behaviour, which are then, I guess, flows into other issues and possibly liability for an employer.
Yeah. Especially in businesses like, say, construction, manufacturing, where there could be high incidence of safety-related injuries, where people just don't care. It's going to cost your business a lot as well, especially when you don't have proper standard operating procedures in place or safety training measures in place. People don't care. They just do whatever they want to do then.
Yeah, and I'm guessing, James, you would have been on the other end of that spectrum trying to repair the damage, or at least can you repair the damage once it's got to that point?
Probably not. To be honest, to be practical, I think there is, typically, typically clients come to lawyers when there's the issue's gone too far, right? And I guess in our way of operating very closely with clients, we speak to them every day, if not week, right? So we kind of catch things before we see them as problems, and that means we have seen opportunities where there is chances to reconcile and chances to do that. But the reality is, unless the employee really desires to be there, and that really comes from the employer recognizing value and the process, and this has been like a one-off occurrence, then I think if it's representative of a cultural issue that the employer is not cognizant of, then there's almost no chance the employee's coming back from that. The relationship just inevitably sours further and further till someone makes a move. And typically, in Australia generally, for employers to move employees on at will is pretty difficult. We have an employee protected system, quite different to the US and other jurisdictions. So, when you talk about that, well, it gets to that point. It's like a bushfire, right? Like all bushfires start with this tiny little flame or a lightning strike, something very containable. If you get there straight away, you put it out, not a problem. Sure, that one tree might have had an issue, a little bit of grass. If you miss that, then it can be catastrophic. And I think that's where we need to think about managing the employee issues on. Well, don't let it get to a point where it's a bushfire now. If it's a little bit of kindling on fire, then let's work out how to put that out. And you've got probably a greater chance of working through the challenges there than at the end. And we see it quite often where you've got employers not recognizing the value of the employees, right? And not the value just in terms of a number, but value in terms of their role in the enterprise. And so a lot of, I guess our job at a board level in particular is to kind of get them to recognize that if you're providing a service-based business, which is 90% of businesses in Australia, right, and any business has some aspect of service to it, and if someone does have a business that doesn't have people involved, then please reach out, because that would be very interesting. But inevitably, it's a client or an employee. So some way there's a person involved. Most businesses have employees critical to the delivery of their service or product. So therefore, we have to keep working with the employers to think that we've got to see more than numbers. We've got to see these aren't just, faceless individuals packing boxes. Even in a warehouse, it's sort of, they're people that are pretty important for your end product. But if they just lob it in there, they break something, you're going to get a return. There's a cost on the business. Like, actually, if you follow it through, if you have a happy workforce and so Raj put it, sort of this happy workforce that's learning, that's part of cultural, that's adopted, that's bought into the business, then it's actually going to be cost saving and value accretive through the process, because the end product is going to reflect the care that the employer has for the employee, which will then translate to the client. So I think we need to think small fire, put it out, work through really hard to work through that, and we see that happen often. When it gets to a bushfire, good luck. Like, you're better off having a really honest discussion, saying this isn't working. What do we need to do this is now the relationship's completely broken down. Maybe we need to just get you into a new job or something like that, because it will start to affect every other part of the organisation too, which is problematic.
So I think some very good points there, James. And I just want to come back to where you're talking about that small containable bushfire, that small event. My understanding is that if you've got a good system, a good relationship with your employees, a good system of accountability and process, then your employees are going to raise those issues with you up front and be comfortable coming to you knowing that you will deal with them straight away.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
So, yeah.
That there's an accountability loop there, right? So it's if you're an employer who's happy and willing to hear your employees about any issue and having the right structures in place. So that might be, if you've got 1,000 people, you're not going to, as the MD, like if you're Commonwealth Bank's MD, Matt Combe, you're not going to sit down with your branch, straight out of school branch person and talk to them about, their day-to-day issues. They might do it once a year to get that exposure and get a selection, right? But you're not going to do it every day. You're going to have a system in place. But if you're an SME that's got 8 employees, then absolutely you kind of have to have an open door policy, and then have a process to deal with the ramifications of that, right? And they can range from someone comes in and says, "Oh, I saw Gary." No offense to any Garys listening, but I saw Gary, basically taking, equipment or product or money, right? And that's like, oh, what do I do now? What's the process that I have to follow? Who do I call to make that, just to ask it? And that's very much like the calls we get. It's like, what do we do in this, right? If it's a cultural question, like, quite frankly, we don't want cultural questions. It's something like a Paul would say, hey, how do we deal with a cultural issue? If it's an issue that's like squabbling, like, oh, so-and-so, moved my desk or did this, like, all right. But as a business owner, you've got to have an open door policy when you're at that size, and then build in a process so that as you grow, you're kind of elevating and replacing, or replacing and elevating. It's kind of this cycle that happens of, okay, I'm going up this level, I'm putting someone in, delegate and elevate. So how do we manage that? And again, if you've typically your founder's going to do everything until there's a size that it doesn't make sense. But I think we have to have the attitude of there's an open door policy, and we've got to own that as employers. We've got to own that, responsibility. And when we've failed someone, then we need to acknowledge it. But also, when they're just raising things because it's a bit of drama, well, actually, we need the ability to step back and say, no, we've done a review process, we followed this, and actually, we don't agree with you in that instance. 'Cause that's the other thing is, if you've got a workplace full of prima donnas, you've got a big problem. So, you don't know who's who in an interview. You get an hour or 2 hours max. and maybe there's a cultural process. Raj, maybe from your point of view, how do you think about it from an L&D point of view to bring people into the culture quickly?
Yeah.
But then also, I guess there's a part of that, which is if they don't get into the culture quickly, if they don't get into the systems, how do you navigate the exiting of that, or at least identification of the employees that are struggling?
Yeah, there's a couple of things there, and there's quite a few good points you picked up there, James. But one of the things is, I would say SMEs don't have proper record keeping. I would start with that.
No.
And because some like the examples you gave of they move my desk and I have an argument with my colleague or whatever, and if this is something that's happening often, then we just tend to they'll sort it out themselves, or we just ignore whatever it is and sweep it under the carpet. Whereas if you actually start documenting incidences and having proper record keeping, and everyone is kept accountable, and so you raised an important topic of accountability there, James. Another thing is I've found with SMEs that they don't have regular performance reviews with employees, and that's an important thing that employees expect, because today SMEs have access to technology that was before was just the domain of big enterprise, and everyone can have simple things like Microsoft 365. It's not expensive, and you can implement it, and you can have proper record keeping in place. You don't have to invest millions of dollars or even tens of thousands of dollars anymore today in technology. It's all quite affordable. So you can then implement a proper system of accountability, performance reviews. I found SMEs tend to have performance reviews, those that do have, like once a year, which is really terrible if you really look at it, because employees want to be kept in touch more often on how am I doing my job, what else can I do to improve myself and also help this business as well. It's not only about me, but it's also I want to help the business too. Now, from a cultural perspective, that's a really good question, and I always like to use Zappos as my example, and I think Paul might remember I've used it in previous podcasts as well. Zappos is an American company, an online shoe retailer, and they probably the biggest in the world in that field, and they're owned by Amazon. But the thing is, when Zappos was founded, they had this whole belief of an employee-driven organization rather than a manager or owner-driven organization. And so employees literally dictate the culture and drive the culture within the organization, and they actually indicate what's important for them rather than management telling them what's important. And I think when you have SMEs, that can be so easily implemented, because when you have a family-owned business, especially, your employees actually are your family. You spend more time with your employees than you would with your own family in many instances, right?
Yeah.
So your employees are your family, and you can help work with them to get them to dictate what the business culture should be. Because once they have bought into that feeling that this is not his business, but my business as well, then they're going to do everything that they possibly can to promote your business. And that's what you literally want as a business owner. You want every employee to feel like they are part of this business, and they actually own the business in a sense, So that's what I would sort of talk about from a culture perspective.
Yeah, interesting. Very interesting. I think the record keeping is like, yeah. We've seen some absolute dogs of businesses with great businesses, terrible record keeping in terms of employees. And you're like, what? Like, okay, how do you operate? How do you do payroll? It's like, oh, we just adopt what they had last year. It's like, okay, let's sort of get that. And the challenge is, right. So when you, as a business owner, as a director, let's just talk directors here. You now are personally exposed for underpayments and all the environmental issues and the workplace safety issues. Like the personal liability of the director has used to be the case. You set up a company to protect yourself. Now legislation is just like, forget about the company. The veil of the company's been lifted. We'll just go around and attack you personally. So directors need to take it seriously, because if there is an employment claim and it's of substance, then personally that can become a real problem for a director. And worst case, if it goes into liquidation or something like that, then suddenly the director's really on the hook for a whole bunch of things, and there's criminal processes, and it's really stepping up this whole wage theft, underpayment, and that's really this balancing act between how do we protect employees, how do we make business okay to do, and I think quite frankly at the moment it's making it harder for business to do business, but the reality is that's the environment we're in. That's the rules of the game. So we've got to play the game according to the rules. And if your business model doesn't work that way, then quite frankly, you probably need to speak to Paul and get a better cash flow and work out how the business model can adjust. It might be a margin issue or something like that. But fundamentally, if the game doesn't work, then we either need to choose not to play it or understand that there's significant personal risk exposure in terms of those sort of things.
Another thing I also saw was a business where there was no respect for privacy and confidentiality of people's records. So literally, you would find employee payslips this line printed on a desk, and anyone that walked past would see what someone's payslip looked like. And that's really bad because I suppose that's sort of very sensitive information to any individual employee to protect what they're earning. Or to keep that confidential. And so that was something that I saw in one of the clients that I worked with as well.
Yeah, that's a very good point. I don't think confidentiality is considered that much at all, right? I think you're absolutely bang on, Raj. Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah. I'm aware that there are plenty of red flags, and I feel like we've just touched the surface, but in terms of going through the many red flags that exist, but there are some key things that we've discussed. And if I'm just trying to sum these up, and James and Raj, if I've missed something, jump in here, please. I think some of the key points are that there's a lot of legislation, requirement, and obligation. Ignorance is not an excuse. Would be one thing. Prevention, all of these issues are largely preventable. You can't prevent somebody having a clash of, behaviour in the office, but the ongoing effects could be preventable, particularly if you've got well-documented policies, processes that are enforced and recognised. Communication is vital in all aspects. Right from that pre-hiring through to induction to day-to-day and reinforcing that. Trust is essential. Your employees need to trust you and you need to trust them. And if there's no trust, then we've got a large potential for a breakdown in many areas. And I think if you've got those systems in place, we're going to avoid that nefarious character creeping into the business, or at least being able to get away with things without being observed. So I think they're probably the key things. I think there's some common traits in a lot of these red flags, but it all comes back to, as the employer, as the business owner, we are ultimately responsible for the culture we create, and particularly around our employees. And James, you mentioned looking at your employees as an asset, which is something I've always been a big fan of. Because the employees can really make or break a business. And if you've got great employees, you encourage them, you foster them, then your business is going to grow and prosper as a result.
Yeah, absolutely. And like I said, if you know a business that has 0 employees and 0 people as customers, let me know, because that would be ideal, right? Like, there's no headaches in that. So I'm yet to find one. It's the mythical, maybe it's the Moby Dick, the white whale that I'm chasing. So, but yeah, I think absolutely right, Paul. It is, if we think about, as business owners, if we think about our employees as assets, just like you have, and this hold the analogy with me. If you think about it as assets, if I'm a trucking company, my asset is a prime mover. I make sure that it's got good fuel. I make sure that it's got a maintenance schedule. I make sure that it's running well. And I listen to it and make sure that if it's not sounding great, I put it in the mechanics and the mechanics sort it out, and you invest in it to keep it going for the long term. And if you can get 1,000,000 Ks out of it, great. All that sort of thing. Interestingly, if we replace prime mover with person there and we say, employee, are we investing in them? Are we checking in with them when they're not sounding so good? Are we making sure they're okay? Do we have a process? Do we have a maintenance schedule? The answer probably for 90% of SMEs will be no, we don't. And I think to Raj's point, that setting up that process would probably save thousands of dollars of compliance issues, having to remediate issues as opposed to, proactively getting on the front foot and treating them like an asset. Because they're much more valuable than a prime mover. So if we treat them that way.
Yeah, absolutely. So Raj, did you have anything you wanted to add to that?
I would say a lot of SMEs don't want to ask for help. They don't want to go to professionals and say, sit down with me and help me plan my business and processes and policies and things that I need to have in place to make sure I'm firstly compliant. I need, as a business owner, I want to know what is within my sphere of control that I need to have in place and that I can manage. I can't control people's behavior. I can't control their attitude, but what I can do is maybe implement better hiring practices so that I can, as close as possible, hire the kind of people that I can relate to and will relate to my business. But if I just want to employ people just because I'm going to save a couple of dollars in wages, I'm going to end up with, like you said, the 23% leaving within 6 months. So within me as a business owner, what is within my area of control? Let me implement all those practices and let me speak to professionals that are in the know, get the right advice, and then move from there. You cannot control everything in your business, and there are a lot of things that are beyond your control, but you've got to know what is within that area that you can implement and control.
Yeah, thanks, Raj and James. I think, as business owners, we've got a lot on our plate, many different things, and we've got a lot of different areas that we feel like we have to be the expert in. But the problem with trying to be the expert in all of those areas is we're going to drop one or two balls, juggling many different balls as the business owner. Focus on what you're good at and get help from the right areas. So get help from your corporate lawyer, making sure you've got all your contracts, your processes in place. Make sure that you actually get help in actually trying to create that best employee culture that you can. Get help in making sure you've got good cash flow systems. So come and talk to me about that. But I think the key is as a small, medium business owner, you've got a lot resting on your shoulders, but you don't have to take it all on yourself. Get help from the right professional, and don't view that as a cost. Again, view that as an asset, because it's actually investing in your business and going to create a better culture, better business, and better lifestyle for you as the owner. So James, Raj, thank you once again for your time and your expert opinions and comments. Really, really helpful to actually just, I think when we hear red flags, we often think reaction and fight, but you've given us some very practical ways to actually say, well, hang on, we can avoid these red flags. We can actually turn that, that issue into an opportunity for our businesses, how we can improve and grow and prosper. So thank you again.
Prevention is better than the cure.
Absolutely. Thanks, Paul. Thanks, Raj.
Thanks, James. Thanks, Paul.
That's a wrap for this episode of The Business Behind Your Business. We hope you found today's discussion insightful and valuable for your business journey. Before we go, don't forget to subscribe to our podcast on your favourite platform. Share it with fellow business owners who could benefit, and send in your burning questions, because we love hearing from you. Missed any of our previous episodes or looking for additional resources to help grow your business? Head over to our website at thebusinessbehindyourbusiness.com. There you'll find our full archive of past episodes, along with show notes, transcripts, and links to valuable resources mentioned in each episode. Your journey to business success continues at thebusinessbehindyourbusiness.com. Until next time, stay inspired, stay informed, and keep building the business of your dreams.